A footballing first in uncharted territory. In 2018, Russia will be the first Eastern European country to hold the World Cup. And Qatar will be the first Middle Eastern country in 2022. As the parties go on, we ask what was FIFA's motive for the decision? What does it mean for the two countries? And what are the challenges ahead? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Sahil Rahman. Welcome to the programme. To many people, choosing Russia to host the 2018 World Cup was not a surprise. But FIFA's other decision has been described as a sporting miracle.
The 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
The people of Qatar, and by extension those of the Middle East, have finally been given a chance to show their true potential.
Thank you for believing in change. Thank you for believing in expanding the game. Thank you for giving Qatar a chance. And we will not let you down. You will be proud of us. You will be proud of the Middle East. And I promise you this.
As a country with a current population of less than 2 million, many of whom are foreigners, Qatar 2022 will be the most compact World Cup of all time. This is not the first sporting event Qatar has organised, but by far it is the biggest. In 2006, Doha hosted the 15th Asian Games with 45 countries participating, and Qatar's victory in the football gave a fitting finale to the event that handed out 1,393 medals presented in ceremonies across 16 venues. Since then, Doha has hosted a number of major sporting events, including the World Gymnastics Championship in 2009 and the 2010 World Indoor Athletics Championships. So let's have a closer look at the two successful bids. They had the advantage that their bids would be the first in their region. They both have robust economies, mainly due to huge gas reserves, and had the biggest budgets. And importantly for FIFA, they have great potential for football as a sport and a business. But while Russia is the world's largest country, Qatar will be the smallest nation ever to host a World Cup. Unsurprisingly, fans in Russia will have to travel thousands of miles between 16 locations. In Qatar, fans could catch 2 games a day. But searing heat will be a problem for the Gulf state. Temperatures could top 50 degrees compared to cooler temperatures in Russia. But Qatar says it will beat the heat with new technologies to create cool microclimates in and around the stadiums. In Russia, the biggest challenge may be corruption. Its Winter Olympics in 2014 has already been dogged by claims of multi-million-dollar kickbacks, and both will have to manage construction and development projects on a vast scale. They'll spend around $4 billion on new stadiums and billions more on the infrastructure. Let's see who's on our programme today. And to my guests in Zurich, David Owen, chief columnist for Inside World Football, a web magazine about the business of world football. In London, Stefan Zimanski, he's a professor of economics and director of sports at Cass Business School at City University in London. And here in Doha, HAFEZ AL-MEDLEJ, he's a member of the Asian Football Confederation Executive Committee. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside Story. Very briefly, let's get your initial ideas of the reaction to both Russia and Qatar. HAFEZ AL-MEDLEJ, your initial impressions of their victories.
Oh, well, thank you to have me in this program. I was a little bit surprised for Russia because, in my opinion, England has the edge. But after what the media or the British media have done to the FIFA, I have my question and doubt about England winning, and Russia and Spain were competitive. But I think still Russia is a big surprise. For me, Qatar is no surprise because I was with the bid from October last year. I was in London with them in Leaders in Football Conference. I saw their job. The youth team convinced me totally, and to be honest, from the beginning I know it's a race between America and Qatar, but in the final presentation the day before yesterday, I think Sheikh Mohammed speaking French, Hassan Dawadi, the CEO, speaking Spanish, and the mother of Sheikh Mohammed finishing the presentation with the big question, I think they clinched it the day before yesterday.
OK, Stefan Zimanski in London, a very different reaction both in the British media, but how did you see it from your perspective?
Yes, I think, frankly, there's a bit of sour grapes going on over here, and it's disappointing to be bad losers. But I think what this really tells us about the way FIFA is choosing to award the World Cup is that it's looking for development and legacy benefits. And it's not just FIFA that's doing this. If you think about the way that the Olympic Games are being awarded by the IOC, the same story is emerging, I think. So what these organisations want is something that's going to be left behind afterwards, which will significantly enhance their long-term reputation. And I think there's no question with what is promised in Russia and Qatar will actually provide that long-term legacy with FIFA's name all over it.
David Owen, a seasoned journalist, you followed one World Cup, I'm sure, after another. You're in Zurich for the announcement, and you're a British journalist as well, so obviously you have different perspectives. I mean, what did you make of it all?
I think Stefan's right. Legacy is an issue here in the development of the World Game. They're both almost virtual bids in the sense that there's very little there at the moment. So that has to really be what the FIFA executive were trying for. Besides that, I kind of have the opposite reaction to your first speaker. I wasn't surprised at all, really, that Russia won, but I was quite surprised that they did bite the bullet and go for Qatar.
HAFEZ Al-MEDLEJ, what's in it for Qatar as a nation, as much as Russia? Because both have huge fuel reserves, which they obviously will sell to build their infrastructure. Russia is already on the map. Qatar, you might say, I'm sure many people went to an atlas to try and find out where it was.
Well, actually, Qatar in the sport arena are on the map a long time ago because they once rescued the FIFA from hosting the Youth World Cup. I remember years back there was a problem in Nigeria, and they gave Qatar only I think 20 days notice, and Qatar successfully organized that World Cup. I agree that the World Cup is different than the Youth World Cup, but nonetheless Qatar is capable. That's one issue. The other issue is I think the benefits go to the Middle East as a region, and when you talk about wealth, when you talk about heritage, and you talk about legacy, I think the Middle East deserves to have the World Cup played in the Middle East, and I think the time is right to come in 2022.
We'll talk about legacy, because legacy, Stefan, for both countries is certainly there. As the former Soviet Union, they hosted the Olympic Games in 1980. They will now, as the Russian Federation, host the Winter Olympics in 2014. Qatar has hosted the Asian Games in 2006 and a whole host of sporting events since then. It is a centre of excellence in this region for sport, as those in the sporting world know. They're both upping their game. Is it just to get profile? Is it to be noticed internationally?
Oh, well, I think that's a huge part of it. I mean, I think the major benefit is that, I mean, as you were saying, everybody's will know exactly where Qatar is, and it will raise the profile of the Gulf more generally. And I think what Mohammed was saying is right, that we should see this in the context of the region as much as in the context of the particular nation. But I mean, in terms of economic benefits, most academics like myself who've looked at the impact after the event, who've actually tried to measure where we can see influences perhaps on employment or output or any other economic measure, really the impact of these events is quite negligible, and our best guess of the long-term economic impact of these events is roughly zero.
David Owen, if we look about economic impact of announcing who would host a World Cup, just can you sort of take us back a little bit to when South Africa was announced as a potential bidder and then actually won the bid to host the World Cup? Because you have to be in it to win it, don't you? There's no point in standing to one side and saying, oh, Africa's never going to get it, and then it does.
Yes, I mean, I think South Africa has certainly changed its international profile fairly dramatically as a result of the World Cup. There was a lot of doubt as to whether the country would be able to put on the competition successfully, as you know, and to a very large degree they succeeded. So that will certainly change their image, has already. Whether they can actually build on it in terms of improving the economy you know, the work is to be done now. If they're to get that sort of economic benefit, they need to take advantage of the fact that they've been in the world's shop window, if you like, during the summer, and use that to actually, you know, drive the bargains that will improve the economy.
Stefan, can I bring you in here, because you're shaking your head? You don't seem to be agreeing with what David's saying.
I think the impact on the global impact on the perception of South Africa is actually quite negligible. I mean, I think everybody knew that South Africa is an economy which has potential, maybe has a lot of economic problems, and I don't think the event itself did much to change people's opinion of that. The visitor numbers were really not spectacular going to South Africa. There was something like 170,000 foreign visitors net addition compared to the previous year. So it's really, it's actually had a small impact with most people who've actually gone there. And then if you think about the actual, what you see on television, really during the World Cup, most people are watching what's going on the pitch. So all the stuff that goes on around this about the location, really, I think most of that goes in one ear and out the other. And there's no evidence really that any host of any major event has really enjoyed any long-term image benefit from hosting one of these events.
Okay, well, let's talk about now some of the challenges as well that these countries face. HAFEZ AL-MEDLEJ, 50 million to invest in the infrastructure, both in Qatar and over in Russia as well. Qatar obviously suggesting they might even dismantle some of these stadiums and offer them to other developing countries to develop the game itself. They've got 12 years. Can they do it?
I'm sure they will do it, and it's not a suggestion, it's a reality. Qatar will not be needing 80 or 60,000 or even 40,000 seat stadium after the World Cup. So the plan is to have the stadium ready for the World Cup, and after that 170,000 seats will be taken off the stadium and given to a country that's needed, which is give the Qatari bid one advantage, that it's the legacy and the benefit is even after the World Cup, and it's not like other bids. And also one other thing that I have to mention, I don't think it's fair to compare South Africa to Qatar bid, because South Africa were competing with African nation. The World Cup being decided 2010 to be in Africa. When South Africa was competing against Germany 2006, they didn't win it. Qatar won against the world largest economy, the superpower of America, and they won it by 14-4 to 8. And that tells you how great the story is. And one other important difference, in South Africa, 75% or more of the people in the stadium were South African. So nobody, I mean, almost only 25% of the spectator came from outside the country. But in the World Cup 2022, I think it's going to be the opposite. I think 90% of the spectator will be coming out of the country.
Let me bring in David here. David, you've been to many World Cups, many large sporting football events. Let's talk about security here from your perspective. You're not an expert, but you certainly are a journalist. You've seen it at first hand and how it works. I mean, when you think of Qatar at a start, what is your initial impression as to coming to the Middle East?
Well, from the security perspective, I'd worry more about the geopolitical stability of the region rather than anything else. But I mean, it's 12 years away. It's a long time. Nobody has the faintest idea what that will be. In terms of security within the country, I actually don't think it will be that much of an issue, because it's going to be so incredibly hot there that the fans who come will just be going from one air-conditioned zone in the hotel to an air-conditioned zone around the stadium, and they're not, you know, they're not really going to be wandering around the country, wandering around the streets in the way that we've seen in, you know, pretty much every World Cup so far.
Certainly in Qatar, Stefan, it is a different kettle of fish. It is a much more smaller country. Doha's capital city is quite walkable, whereas in Russia we're looking at 16 locations over a wide space. The security issues, certainly for both countries, are quite tangible. You have Chechen uprising and problems in the Caucasus. The Middle East has its own set of unique problems. I mean, how do you see it from a London perspective?
I think the challenges for the Russians are actually far greater. I mean, again, I think David's absolutely right. You know, this is going to be a small area. It's going to be very easy controlled. The temperature will help you keep things under control very easily. I think. I mean, what's unusual about the Qatar success is, of course, it is such a small local area, and people have never before moved between stadiums that are so close to each other. As you said in the introduction, 2 games on the same day. That's just unimaginable in previous World Cups. The Russians have this hugely diverse set of locations where they want to host the games. The transport problems could be very significant. It's certainly they'll have to go a long way to improve on the current state of the infrastructure. The security issues are potentially large, as you say. The opportunity for some of the rebel groups in that country cause a significant problem. And as we've seen with the development of the Russian infrastructure, the development of the Winter Olympics, there are serious corruption issues in Russia, and that leads to worries when in the construction industry when things have to get done on time and to budget.
Well, let's just take a little pause here. I want to bring in some pictures now that we're getting from Doha. This is the international airport at Doha. Now, all the dignitaries within high society here in Doha, members of the extended royal family, will all be waiting now for the pending arrival of the winning bid team from Qatar, of course, led by His Majesty Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al-THANI, and of course the chairman himself, his younger son, Sheikh Mohammed bin Hamad Al-THANI. Let's move over to the Corniche. Doha is a coastal capital. This is what it looks like at the moment. Gridlock traffic. Practically all of the vehicles themselves have some sort of flag of Qatar arranging from it. It's very, very tumultuous and very exciting, really, for the public here in Qatar. It gives you an idea, certainly, gentlemen, you can hear it, perhaps you can't see it at the moment, of how excited this very small country is about winning this bid. David Owen, can I come over to you in Zurich? In terms of Qatar as a country, it has, or it says, it's one of the safest places to host a World Cup, and we've seen from history in terms of its hosting of particular sporting events, it's done a very credible job. Hence, more and more international federations come here as it is a centre of excellence in the region. How significant do you think that particular issue is when, in the same breath, England as a bidding city, the United States as a bidding country, and the United States as a bidding country, Spain and Portugal, all have very good facilities themselves, especially when it comes to football?
Oh, I think the facilities in Doha and Qatar, the ones that exist at the moment, are absolutely excellent. I mean, I've seen nothing in the world to compare with the Aspire Academy. So I don't see that as a problem at all. They face a huge building project, obviously, absolutely massive, but the development of the country over the last 15 years or so suggests that while it won't be easy, they're perfectly capable of doing it. I don't see that as a problem at all. I think the issue is more to do with fans and what they're going to do when they get there, and how long they're going to stay, because with the best will in the world, for the fans who have been in the habit, as some of them have, of taking like a month out to go to the World Cup and get to know a country while watching the football, I'm not really sure that there's enough to detain people in Qatar for a month. So I imagine we're going to be seeing people coming for short periods of time, rather more than we have done in the past.
Very different, perhaps a very different perspective on how people react to this World Cup.
I think we'll see some very...
it would be a very different World Cup, definitely.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah. I think we'll see some very different patterns in behaviour.
Indeed.
To the ones in the past, but you know, maybe that's in some ways a positive thing.
I mean, there are lots of cultural differences, Stefan. If I bring you in here along with Mr. HAFEZ Al-MEDLEJ, Qatar is a Muslim country. It's a dry country. They've got to make, do they have to make allowances actually for issues such as alcohol or for beaches to be made public so people can sunbathe? Modesty in clothing, Mr. Al-MEDLEJ, is quite high on the priority here in Islamic countries.
Well, I think Qatar, reached that point now in hotel and compound, and that will be also by OLC, and Prince Mohammed has proved to people that Qatar will be capable of meeting all the visitor expectation. Qatar is a very open country. Don't brand it by any region or religious or anything. It's Qatar, Islamic country, but it's very open, and you will find in Qatar what you will find in any European country, with the expectation that will meet even. I think people will experience a better World Cup than the one they experienced now a few months back in South Africa. I was there with the organizing committee. I spent 40 days in South Africa. The weather was freezing. I rather to have the World Cup in a warm climate than cold climate. And don't forget, 1994 in America, we played, Saudi Arabia played Belgica on almost 45, 46 degree in the midday because of the time zone. So I don't want people to put so many emphasis on the weather or in the comeback of the country or being in the Middle East.
But I think we do have to emphasise some of it. And if I come to Stefan Zimanski, I mean, regardless of the fact now of what you think of a country as an outsider, people are now going to start analysing Qatar, analysing Russia. And let's just bring in human rights. It's one of the biggest issues that is always raised with these sorts of events. Russia has its issues on human rights and how it deals with suspected terrorists, for example, or insurgents from the Caucasus. Human rights has its issue. Qatar has its issues as well. In terms of labour, in terms of its expat working, its domestic helpers, and those issues are going to come to the forefront, are they not?
The real issue is, where are the people going to come from who will go? I mean, the suggestion was that 3/4 of the visitors to this World Cup are going to come from abroad. Now, if we look at South Africa, as I was saying, it's culturally very receptive to all comers, really, and yet the number of fans that they managed to attract from the traditional countries that send fans, which are basically European countries, they were not very high. The largest group of travelling fans in South Africa actually came from the United States, and there were about something like 50-odd thousand more visitors from the United States than South Africa had previously. And then the Europeans came second. Now, my view of this is that Europeans and Americans are not going to be flooding to go to Qatar for the World Cup. Some will go, I'm sure they will, but as David was saying, there's not going to be very many other reasons for going, and I think people will see it as a long way to go. They'll see it as a very hot place to go, and the question is, will Qatar be able to have visitors replace those Europeans and Americans with visitors from other places?
Well, there we will, I think.
Will the visitors from the rest of the Gulf and the rest of the Middle East?
And those are questions, I think, Stefan, that we will have to raise in future programmes here on Inside Story. I could see David in Zurich also nodding in agreement, as well as HAFEZ in Doha. This is the first, I'm sure, of many debates and conversations about the World Cup. 8 and 12 years we have here on Al Jazeera to talk about it. I'm sure we'll be inviting all three of you in Zurich, London and Doha back to this programme again. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. And you won't have to wait 8 or 12 years for the next Inside Story. There'll be another one very, very soon. We do enjoy your comments and suggestions. Do email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Sahil Rahman. Thanks very much for your time and your company.